Dr. Elias Monroe stood at the edge of a wide, dark cavern. His eyes, filled with excitement and curiosity, studied the ancient walls. Strange glowing symbols danced across the stone, casting soft blue light on his face. His robot assistant, Quill, hovered nearby, small and round with blinking lights for eyes. "Careful, Doctor," Quill said in a smooth, calm voice. "These structures are unstable." Elias smiled but kept moving forward. "Relax, Quill. This place has been standing for thousands of years. I don't think it'll choose today to fall." They had traveled far to reach this planet, Sarthos, a world forgotten by time. Long ago, a great alien civilization had lived here. Now, only empty cities and silent ruins remained. For Elias, an archaeologist who loved discovering lost things, this was a dream come true. As he stepped deeper into the cavern, his flashlight shone on something unusual. A giant door made of smooth black stone. It had no handle, no buttons, just more glowing symbols, brighter than the others. Quill floated closer, scanning the door. "These markings do not match any known language in our database," the robot reported. "That's because no one's seen anything like this before," Elias whispered, running his hand along the smooth surface. The stone felt warm under his fingers, as if it were alive. Then something strange happened. As Elias touched one of the symbols, it lit up brighter, and a soft humming filled the air. "Doctor, I advise you to step back," Quill warned, its voice sharper now. But Elias shook his head. "I think this is a lock. Maybe a way to open the door." He pulled out a small device from his bag. A universal decoder, something all archaeologists use to hack ancient technology. It had never failed him before. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding," he murmured, attaching the decoder to the door. Lights flickered rapidly across the door. The symbols began shifting and changing, as if they were moving in response to the device. Then, with a loud click, the giant stone door slowly slid open, releasing a gust of cold air from the darkness beyond. Elias grinned. "See, Quill, nothing to worry about." But Quill didn't look convinced. Opening unknown alien structures without understanding them is statistically unwise, the robot said. Ignoring the warning, Elias stepped inside. The chamber beyond the door was enormous. A high ceiling rose above them, and crystal lights glowed softly on the walls. In the center stood a massive object that took Elias's breath away. A giant crystalline sarcophagus, clear and shining like glass, but with veins of glowing blue running through it. Inside the sarcophagus was a figure, tall, graceful, and unlike anything Elias had ever seen. She had long, delicate limbs and elegant armor that seemed part of her body. Her eyes were closed, and her silver hair floated gently inside, as if she were sleeping in water. "Quill, are you seeing this?" Elias asked, awed. "Confirmed, Doctor. Life signs are faint but present. Subject is alive." Elias took a careful step closer. "Alive? After all this time?" "Yes," Quill replied. "Based on decay rates, this technology has preserved her for thousands of years." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. Who was she? A queen? A warrior? A prisoner? On the side of the sarcophagus, there were more symbols. Without thinking, Elias placed his hand on them. They glowed at his touch, and suddenly, the whole room began to shake. "Dr. Monroe, I strongly advise retreat," Quill shouted, flying in quick circles around him. But before Elias could move, the sarcophagus opened with a loud hiss, releasing a misty vapor that filled the air. Elias stepped back quickly, heart pounding, as the figure inside slowly began to move. Her eyes opened, bright silver and glowing like twin moons. She sat up, moving gracefully, as if waking from a long sleep. For a long moment, she just stared at Elias. Her gaze was calm but sharp, filled with intelligence and something older, deeper, like she had seen things no one else could imagine. Elias swallowed hard, trying to think of what to say. "Oh, hello." The alien woman tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then, in a voice that was both soft and powerful, she spoke, though Elias couldn't understand a word. "Quill." Translation. Elias whispered. The robot's lights blinked as it worked. Language unknown. Processing. The woman slowly stood up, tall and proud. She looked around at the ruined chamber and then back at Elias. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if realizing how much time had passed. She raised her hand, and to Elias's shock, the broken pieces of the chamber's wall floated into the air at her command. "Doctor, she is not ordinary," Quill whispered. Elias couldn't take his eyes off her. "No," he said softly. "She's something else." The woman turned to him again, and this time her glowing eyes seemed to ask a question, one Elias didn't yet understand. But one thing was clear: he had awakened something ancient and powerful, and the world would never be the same. Elias stood frozen, unable to look away from the alien woman. She was taller than any human, her skin a pale, almost glowing shade of silver, and her eyes, bright as stars, locked onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. Quill hovered nervously beside him. "Doctor, I advise extreme caution. We have no way of knowing if she is friend or foe." Elias nodded slowly, still unsure what to do. The woman's presence was overwhelming, her silent power filling the room like a force of nature. She stepped forward, her long, graceful limbs moving with a fluidity that seemed almost unnatural. The mist around her seemed to cling to her like an aura. "Are you?" Elias started, his voice soft. "Are you a queen?" The woman tilted her head slightly, still silent. Her gaze flicked over the chamber, taking in the ruins around her. Her expression didn't change, but Elias felt an unmistakable sense of ancient wisdom in her eyes. She was old, far older than anything humanity had encountered. Her very presence spoke of a forgotten history, of an empire long gone. Suddenly, she lifted her hand, and the room seemed to respond to her, vibrating with energy. Elias took a step back, startled. The air around them felt charged, like a storm was brewing, but it was controlled, contained within her. A voice, soft but powerful, broke through the silence. The words were unfamiliar, strange, and they sent a shiver down Elias's spine. She spoke again, and this time her voice held a command, like the sound of thunder in the distance. "Quill," Elias whispered. "Can you translate that?" Quill buzzed, its lights blinking rapidly. "Working." Translation unsuccessful. The language is unknown. The woman seemed to notice their confusion. She paused, her glowing eyes narrowing. Then she raised her hand, and the air around Elias and Quill grew still. The woman's voice softened, and this time there was an unmistakable hint of curiosity in her tone. "You are human." The words echoed in Elias's mind, as if they were being translated directly into his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat. She wasn't just speaking, she was communicating telepathically. Elias took a slow breath. "Yes, I'm human. My name is Elias Monroe. I didn't mean to wake you." The woman studied him for a long moment. Her gaze was unblinking, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke again, her voice now quieter, almost sorrowful. "You have released me from my prison." Elias swallowed. "I didn't know. I found this place. I was just. You should not have." Her voice was sharp now, filled with an ancient authority. The barrier was not meant to be broken. You have awakened what should have remained forgotten. Elias felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. "What is it you're talking about? Who are you?" She stepped closer, her presence almost overwhelming. "I am Seraphis, Queen of the Xarthos." Elias's eyes widened. "Xarthos, the legendary civilization. You're from the Xarthos." Seraphis nodded slowly, her gaze still locked onto him. "I was the ruler of my people. My empire spanned stars, and we were a force to be reckoned with. But I failed. Elias's mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The stories, the ancient ruins, the myths of a fallen empire. Seraphis was real, and her people, the Xarthos, had once ruled the galaxy. You failed, Elias asked, his voice filled with confusion. How? Seraphis looked away, her expression darkening. The Nulkin came. She paused, her voice heavy with grief. They were once our allies, our friends, but they betrayed us, destroyed us, and I was imprisoned, so that I could never rise again. Elias's heart raced as the weight of her words settled in. The Nulkin, an ancient enemy of the Xarthos, a race believed to be extinct. But now Seraphis spoke of them as if they were still a threat. Why are they gone now? Elias asked carefully. Why were they wiped out? Seraphis's eyes flicked back to him, her face hardening. The Nulkin were not destroyed. They fled. They waited. And now they will return. A cold silence filled the room. Elias looked to Quill for guidance, but the robot seemed just as uncertain as he was. What had they just awakened? A queen from a fallen empire, yes, but also a being whose past was filled with betrayal, loss, and the threat of a terrible enemy still lurking in the shadows. Seraphis's voice broke through the silence, calm but filled with a hidden power. The Nulkin's return is inevitable. You have freed me, and now I must rise once more. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just an ancient queen waking from a long sleep. This was a warrior awakening, a force of nature that had been buried for a reason. And she was not just any queen. She was a queen whose people had been destroyed by the Nulkin, a queen whose enemies might be closer than they realized. What do you need from me? Elias asked, his voice trembling slightly. Seraphis looked at him, her glowing eyes intense. I need your help, human. You have awakened me, and I will not rest until the Nulkin are no more. Elias nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. He wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was certain. The universe had just become a lot more dangerous. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed the moment Seraphis had spoken. The quiet ruins they had explored only hours ago now felt like a ticking clock. He glanced at the alien queen, still standing in the center of the chamber, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the low light. Do you know what you've awakened, human? Seraphis's voice echoed softly in his mind, again through the telepathic link. Elias didn't know how to answer. I didn't know what you were or how you could be alive, he said quietly. I didn't know about the Nulkin. Seraphis stared at him, a look of sadness crossing her face. You have learned of the Nulkin only now, but they have been watching, waiting. And now that I am awake, they will not waste time. Elias's mind raced. The Nulkin. She had spoken of them as though they were a growing shadow over the galaxy. How had she known they would return? Had they somehow been tracking her, or were they already here, hidden among the stars? Quill hovered beside Elias, its lights flickering as it processed the information. Doctor, the Nulkin are unknown in our records, but Seraphis's powers, they may be linked to her people's technology. We need to proceed with caution. I know, Elias whispered, his mind spinning. He could feel Seraphis's presence in the room, like an invisible force that made the air feel thick and heavy. Seraphis walked slowly across the room, her feet barely making a sound on the stone floor. As she moved, the air around her seemed to shimmer. Elias noticed small rocks and debris floating gently behind her, held up by some unseen force. Your power, Elias said, watching her carefully. What are you doing? Seraphis didn't respond at first, but her voice rang out in Elias's mind once more. My people possessed great power, human, and I am the last of them. This place, it holds memories of that power. It calls to me. She lifted her hand, and the room seemed to respond, the walls humming with a low, deep sound. The large crystal sarcophagus, still partly open, began to glow brighter, its blue light pulsing in time with Seraphis's movements. A strange energy filled the air, and Elias felt it. A force, an ancient strength that made the ground beneath him tremble. "Quill," Elias said, stepping back. "What's happening?" "I cannot identify this energy, Doctor," Quill replied, its voice tinged with worry. "It seems to be some form of telekinetic force, but on a scale we've never observed. The chamber is reacting to Seraphis." Seraphis didn't seem to notice their concern. She stood in the center of the room, her eyes closed, her arms raised, as if reaching for something just beyond her grasp. The air grew colder, the humming sound growing louder. Small stones and broken debris from the chamber's ruins swirled around her like a gentle storm. For a moment, Elias felt as though he was witnessing something ancient and incredibly powerful, something beyond human comprehension. Then Seraphis opened her eyes, her gaze turning toward him. Her silver eyes gleamed with a sharp intensity. "I need your help, human," she said, her voice still calm, but with an edge of urgency. "You've released me, and now we must prepare. The Nulkin are close. We must act before they arrive." Elias swallowed hard. "What do you mean, prepare? I'm not sure what I can do here. I'm just an archaeologist, not a soldier." Seraphis stepped closer, her presence now overwhelming, filling the room with an almost tangible energy. "You are human. You will help me because you have awakened something greater than you understand. This is not about soldiers or weapons. It is about survival. And together, we will defeat the Nulkin." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and the air seemed to grow even colder. Elias shivered, but he forced himself to stand tall. "All right," he said, though his voice wavered. "What do we need to do?" Without answering, Seraphis moved toward a large panel in the wall, hidden beneath layers of dust and debris. She pressed her hand against it, and immediately, the panel shifted open with a hiss, revealing a control system filled with alien technology. The lights flickered and began to glow, as though the panel itself were. "This is one of the last remaining control centers of my empire," Seraphis explained, her voice full of both pride and sadness. "Here, I can access the systems that once powered my fleet. With this, I can track the Nulkin. But I will need your help to activate it fully." Elias approached cautiously. "What do you need me to do?" "Place your hand on the panel," Seraphis instructed. "It will connect your mind to the ancient network. Your thoughts will guide the system. I cannot do this alone. I do not have the strength yet." Elias hesitated. The idea of connecting his mind to an alien system was unsettling, but he could see no other choice. He placed his hand on the panel, feeling the cool metal beneath his skin. Immediately, a flood of images and information rushed into his mind. Ancient battles, ships as large as planets, the Xarthos Empire at its height, and then the Nulkin, a dark, twisted race with their cold, empty eyes and cruel weapons. The connection felt overwhelming, but Elias fought to stay focused. He could see the movements of the Nulkin ships, hidden within the folds of space, slowly making their way toward the planet. "The Nulkin are coming," Elias said, his voice shaking. They're already here." Seraphis' expression hardened. "Then we must act quickly." She stepped back, and the energy in the room shifted. The panel in front of them glowed with a blinding light, and Elias could feel the power of the ancient technology stirring to life. The dormant defenses of the Xarthos Empire were waking up. And for the first time, Elias realized just how dangerous this new alliance with Seraphis might be. They were standing at the edge of something far larger than they had ever imagined, a war between the last of an ancient empire and a deadly enemy that would stop at nothing to destroy them. The chamber hummed with energy as the ancient Xarthos technology activated. Elias's hand still rested on the glowing panel, his mind racing with the flood of alien information. He could feel Seraphis's presence beside him, her silent power waiting for the right moment to strike. "The Nulkin," Elias muttered, his breath shallow. "They're moving fast. They're almost here." Seraphis stood tall, her silver eyes focused on the glowing map that now hovered in the air before them. The map displayed a galaxy far more complex than anything Elias had seen before, a web of stars, planets, and ships, all connected in ways he couldn't fully understand. "I see them," Seraphis said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "The Nulkin are close, but we have time. Just enough time to prepare." Elias pulled his hand away from the panel, feeling the connection slip from his mind. The information he had seen was overwhelming, but there was no time to process it. The Nulkin, an ancient enemy of the Xarthos, were coming, and Seraphis was the only one who could stop them. "Quill," Elias said, turning to his robot assistant, "can you scan the surroundings? I need to know what kind of defenses we have here." "Scanning now, Doctor," Quill replied, its lights flickering. "It seems the chamber is equipped with a variety of defense systems, energy shields, automated turrets, and cloaking devices. However, they are in a dormant state. We will need to activate them manually." Seraphis nodded, her gaze still fixed on the map. "The defenses of my people are powerful, but they will not be enough. We must do more than just defend." "What else do we need?" Elias asked, his voice urgent. "Tell me, and I'll help." Seraphis turned to face him. "I need to reconnect with my fleet. I must awaken the warships that lie buried beneath the surface of Tarthos. Only with their power can we stand against the Nulkin." Elias swallowed hard. The idea of waking up ancient warships was both terrifying and exhilarating. But Seraphis seemed to know what she was doing, and he had no choice but to trust her. "Where do we start?" he asked. She pointed to the far wall, where another hidden panel lay concealed beneath layers of dust. "There is a deep access tunnel that leads to the heart of the Xarthos warships. We must get there quickly." Elias nodded, his mind racing. "All right, let's move." The journey through the ruins of the Xarthos city was unlike anything Elias had ever experienced. The walls, once magnificent and full of life, were now crumbling under the weight of time. The air smelled of decay, but there was a strange beauty in the silence. It was as though the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Seraphis led the way, her movements swift and graceful. Elias and Quill followed closely behind, keeping their eyes open for any signs of danger. As they made their way deeper into the city, Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on him. The Xarthos had once ruled the stars, but now they were a forgotten empire. At last, they'd reached the entrance to the access tunnel. The door was massive, made of the same black stone as the one in the chamber. Seraphis placed her hand on the door, and it immediately responded, opening with a low rumble. Beyond the door lay a narrow passageway, lit by dim, flickering lights. "This way," Seraphis said, her voice soft but filled with authority. They moved through the tunnel, the walls closing in around them. Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The further they went, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. It was as though the very foundation of the city was alive, waiting for something to awaken. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a large chamber at the end of the tunnel. The room was filled with rows of ancient warships, each one larger and more powerful than any ship Elias had ever seen. The ships were covered in dust and debris, but Elias could still see the intricate designs etched into their surfaces. They looked like something out of a dream. "This is it," Seraphis said, her voice reverberating with awe. "My fleet." Elias took a step forward, his heart pounding. These ships had been dormant for millennia, but now they were their only hope. "How do we wake them up?" he asked. Seraphis moved to the center of the room, where a large control panel stood. "I will activate the systems, but it will take time. The Nulkin will be here soon. We must defend this chamber until the fleet is ready." Elias turned to Quill. Can you help with the defenses? Activating now, Doctor, Quill replied. I will sync with the defense systems in this area. Seraph's eyes glowed brighter as she activated the panel, sending waves of energy through the room. The warships began to hum to life, their engines sputtering as they began to power up. Elias felt the ground shake beneath his feet as the ancient technology began to awaken, but there was no time to celebrate. The Nulkin were coming, and they wouldn't wait. I will need your help to hold them off, Seraphis said, her tone now commanding. The Nulkin have no mercy. We cannot afford to fail. Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. Let's do it. The room was suddenly filled with the sound of whirring machinery and crackling energy as the first of the Nulkin ships appeared on the horizon, their dark forms cutting through the space between the stars. The war had begun. The atmosphere in the chamber was thick with tension. Seraphis's hands moved quickly over the control panel, her silver eyes glowing with determination. Elias could feel the ground beneath him tremble with the awakening of the Xarthos warships, their engines slowly coming to life. But even as hope flickered, the sound of approaching ships, the Nulkin ships, grew louder in the distance, a cold, dark presence edging ever closer. Quill, hovering at Elias's side, flickered with lights. Doctor, the Nulkin ships are nearly within range. We have mere minutes before they reach the planet's orbit. Elias glanced at Seraphis. Her face was calm, yet a fierce energy emanated from her, as though she were preparing for something much larger than just a battle. She wasn't only a queen. She was the last of a proud empire, and perhaps the galaxy's last hope. We need to move quickly, Elias said, his voice steady, but inside, his pulse raced. Can the warships defend themselves? Seraphis nodded, not looking away from the control panel. Yes, but they need time to fully power up. The Nulkin will not give us that time. She gestured toward the far side of the chamber, where several energy shields flickered to life around the warships. The ancient machines hummed with power, their dark forms slowly coming to life. But the longer they took to power up, the more vulnerable they became. Quill, help Seraphis, Elias ordered. I'll prepare the defenses in this room. I will assist, Doctor, Quill replied, its lights flashing as it moved to the control panel beside Seraphis. The robotic assistant began to work quickly, sensing with the systems and activating any remaining dormant technology in the room. Elias took a deep breath and stepped away from them. He moved to the center of the room, where a set of ancient turrets was mounted. The devices looked worn but still formidable. He hoped they were enough to buy Seraphis the time she needed to bring the fleet online. As he activated the turrets, a harsh warning flashed on the walls. The Nulkin ships were now in orbit. Through the large window at the far end of the room, Elias could see the first of the dark, menacing ships. It was massive, its hull covered in jagged edges and glowing red markings that sent a chill down his spine. This was not just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy. The Nulkin have arrived. Seraphis's voice rang in Elias's mind, calm but filled with the weight of her ancient knowledge. Prepare yourself, human. This will not be easy. A series of alarms blared as the first Nulkin ship opened fire. A bright beam of energy shot out, crashing into the surface of the Xarthos city. The ground shook violently as the blast hit, sending debris flying into the air. Elias ducked behind the nearest turret, his heart pounding. The first blast was a warning. The Nulkin had no mercy. Quill, Elias shouted. Activate the shields now. I'm on it, Quill replied. In an instant, a shimmering blue barrier surrounded the warships, blocking the first wave of fire from the Nulkin. But the shield wasn't invincible. It flickered, dimming under the intensity of the blasts. Seraphis's eyes glowed even brighter as she worked at the control panel. The shields will hold for only a short time. The Nulkin are prepared for our defenses. Elias nodded, gripping the edge of the turret. He could hear the distant roar of engines as more Nulkin ships arrived, their dark shapes filling the sky like a swarm of vultures. It was clear now that the warships were not enough to stop them. Not yet. The turrets Elias had activated hummed with energy, and he aimed them at the incoming ships. The blasts hit their targets with precision, but the Nulkin ships were heavily armored, and the shots barely made a dent. "Hold your ground," Seraphis' voice came through again. This time, it had a sharp edge, as though she were preparing for something even more desperate. "We must awaken the full power of the fleet." Elias's mind raced. "What do you mean?" Seraphis glanced at him briefly, her face unreadable. "The warships alone will not win this battle. We must release the core weapons of my empire. It is dangerous, but we have no choice." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "Core weapons? What kind of weapons?" Seraphis didn't answer immediately. Instead, she focused on a different panel in the room, her fingers flying over the controls. Powering up. Suddenly, the entire chamber trembled as if something deep within the planet was waking. A low rumble shook the walls, and Elias could feel the energy building. The warships around them responded, their weapons locking into place. "This will be the final strike," Seraphis said, her voice colder now. "We will either win or perish." Before Elias could respond, the room filled with a bright flash of light as the core weapons powered up. Energy waves surged outward, crackling through the air and sending pulses of raw power toward the approaching Nulkin ships. The warships opened fire, their massive guns firing in unison. The first few shots hit the Nulkin ships with earth-shattering force. The dark vessels reeled from the blow, their shields cracking under the pressure. Elias's heart raced as he saw the first Nulkin ship disintegrate, its hull ripped apart by the sheer power of the ancient weaponry. But there were many more coming. The battle had only just begun. The battle raged outside the chamber as Elias gripped the control panel. He could see the Nulkin ships in the distance, their dark shapes moving through space, surrounded by the crackling energy of the Xarthos warships. The first wave had been repelled, but the enemy forces were far from defeated. "They're retreating. For now," Seraphis' voice echoed in his mind. The flicker of tension in her tone was unmistakable. "But it won't last long. They are regrouping, and soon they'll strike with full force." Elias's eyes flicked back to the glowing map. The energy from the core weapons had created a small gap in the Nulkin's advance, but it wouldn't hold. The Xarthos fleet, though mighty, wasn't enough to stop the overwhelming force of the Nulkin's numbers. He glanced at Seraphis, standing by the control panel. She was calm, her silver eyes focused and calculating, but Elias could sense the urgency beneath her composed exterior. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. Seraphis didn't hesitate. "We will activate the cloaking devices." She looked at him, her face serious. "The Nulkin will not see us coming." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "Cloaking devices? You mean the warships can hide from their sensors?" "Yes," Seraphis said, nodding. "But we must act quickly. The Nulkin are already preparing their counterattack. If they know we are hiding, they will search every corner of the galaxy to find us." Elias turned to Quill, who had been quiet for a while. "Quill, can you sync with the cloaking systems?" "I'm already on it, Doctor," Quill replied, its voice calm but precise. Activating cloaking devices now. The air in the room seemed to change as the warship's energy output shifted. Slowly, the ships around them began to disappear, blending into the background of space, as though they were never there. The Xarthos fleet was now hidden, but it was only a temporary advantage. Elias looked out the window, watching the faint outlines of the Nulkin ships begin to search for them. The enemy seemed to have no clear direction, their ships darting aimlessly through space as if trying to detect any sign of the hidden Xarthos fleet. "We need to be ready," Elias said, feeling the weight of the situation on his shoulders. "How much time do we have before they figure out we're here?" Seraphis's eyes narrowed as she analyzed the movements of the Nulkin ships. "They will know soon." As if on cue, a sharp alarm rang throughout the room. The Nulkin had begun to scan for the hidden fleet, using advanced technology that could detect even the faintest energy signatures. The cloak would not hide them forever. "They have found us," Seraphis said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias's heart pounded in his chest. "What now?" "They'll be on us in seconds." Seraphis' expression hardened. "Now we fight." Without warning, the warships emerged from their cloaking, their massive forms appearing as if they had materialized out of nowhere. The first wave of Nulkin ships charged forward, their weapons charging with deadly energy. But the Xarthos fleet was ready. The warships fired in unison, their core weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The beams of energy shot across the void, colliding with the enemy ships and tearing through their shields. The Nulkin forces retaliated with their own deadly blasts, the sound of explosions filling the air. Elias could only watch as the battle unfolded before him. The sheer power of the Xarthos warships was overwhelming, but the Nulkin were relentless. They fought with a cold, calculated fury, their ships swarming around the Xarthos fleet like a pack of wolves. "This is it," Elias whispered to himself, clenching his fists. He knew they had no choice but to win. There was no going back now. The sound of heavy blasts and the hum of energy weapons filled the room as the warships traded fire. It was a battle on a scale Elias had never imagined. Every second counted. Every move would determine the fate of countless lives. "We need to hit them harder," Seraphis said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Use the full power of the fleet's weapon systems." Elias didn't need to be told twice. He rushed to a new console, activating additional systems that would unleash the full might of the warships. The core weapons powered up again, this time with even greater intensity. The Xarthos fleet was now firing in waves, their energy beams ripping through the Nulkin ships, creating shockwaves that reverberated through the battlefield. But the Nulkin were not giving up. They adapted quickly, using their advanced tactics to try and outmaneuver the Xarthos forces. New waves of enemy ships appeared, surrounding the Xarthos fleet from all sides. "We cannot keep this up for much longer," Seraphis said, her tone sharp with urgency. "They are too numerous." Elias's mind raced. He knew that the Xarthos fleet was powerful, but against the Nulkin's numbers and their advanced technology, the odds seemed impossible. They needed something more, something that would turn the tide in their favor. Suddenly, an idea sparked in Elias's mind. "Seraphis, can we use the core weapons to disrupt their fleet all at once? A massive blast that could knock them off course." Seraphis's eyes widened. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with hope. "That could work, but we must do it now." Elias quickly activated the system, linking it to the main fleet controls. The warships aligned their weapons, their cores glowing brightly with raw energy. The Nulkin, unaware of the trap, continued their assault. Elias took a deep breath. "Now, Seraphis, let's do it." The warships unleashed their full might in a single, massive pulse of energy. The blast surged across space, striking the Nulkin ships in unison. The force was enough to disrupt their shields, throwing their formations into chaos. For a brief moment, the Xarthos fleet had the upper hand. But Elias knew that this was only a temporary victory. The Nulkin would regroup. The war was far from over. "This is just the beginning," Seraphis said, her voice filled with determination. "But we have a chance now, and we will take it." Elias nodded, his heart racing. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. They had won a battle, but the war was far from finished. The battlefield in space had become a chaotic blur of flashing lights, crashing explosions, and the hum of weapons fire. Elias stood at the control panel, his hands shaking slightly from the intensity of what had just happened. The Xarthos warships had dealt a devastating blow to the Nulkin fleet, but Elias knew better than to think they were finished. The Nulkin were relentless, and they would not stop until they destroyed everything in their path. Seraphis's silver eyes glowed softly as she looked out into space, her expression unreadable. The war was far from over, and she knew the stakes all too well. Elias could feel the weight of her thoughts without her saying a word. The Nullkin were planning their next move, and it would be their most dangerous yet. "They are regrouping," Seraphis said, her voice calm but filled with the gravity of the situation. "They will not let this defeat stand. We must prepare for the final assault." Elias took a deep breath, steadying himself. The Xarthos fleet was in better shape than before, but not by much. The warships had suffered damage from the Nullkin's relentless assault, and even with their advanced weaponry, they could only take so much before they were overwhelmed. "We need more firepower," Seraphis continued. "The Nullkin have many more ships than we do. We must draw them into a trap." "A trap?" Elias asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. "What do you mean?" Seraphis' eyes flashed with determination. "The Xarthos built secret weapons, hidden in deep space. They are powerful enough to destroy an entire fleet in one strike. But they must be activated manually." Elias's heart raced. "Where are these weapons? How do we activate them?" Seraphis stepped closer, her voice low and filled with urgency. "I will guide you. We must reach the control station at the edge of the system, far from here. The Nullkin will not suspect it." Elias nodded. "Let's go. We don't have much time." The journey to the control station was tense. As they made their way through the remnants of the Xarthos Empire, Elias could feel the gravity of the situation bearing down on him. Every step felt like a moment of truth. The fate of the galaxy rested on what they were about to do. They passed through dark corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The remnants of the Xarthos civilization were everywhere. Faded murals, abandoned temples, and shattered technology. It was hard to believe that this once great empire had fallen. But Elias knew that if they succeeded today, the Xarthos would rise again, in some form. When they finally reached the control station, the door opened with a heavy rumble. Inside, the walls were lined with dormant machinery, waiting to be awakened. Seraphis moved quickly, activating a series of ancient panels with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. "We don't have much time," Seraphis murmured as she worked. "The Nullkin are closing in." Elias stood guard near the door, keeping his eyes on the outside. He could feel the presence of the Nullkin fleet getting closer, their ships filling the space around the planet. The tension was unbearable. They had to get the weapons online now. Suddenly, the lights in the control room flickered, and a low hum filled the air. Elias turned to see the main console light up. The weapons were coming online. It was working. "We're almost there," Seraphis said, her voice filled with hope. "Just a little longer." Elias gripped his blaster, ready for anything. The Nullkin would not let them finish without a fight. He knew it was only a matter of time before they arrived. A loud thrum echoed through the station as the weapons powered up. The control panel lit up with an array of data, showing the massive energy buildup required for the strike. Elias could feel the power surging through the room, the very air vibrating with potential energy.